Hello and welcome to the Leaders of Tomorrow, the only show in Indian television right now where you, the MSME, get sent a stage to voice your opinions and thoughts. This is ET&R's special daily initiative to give MSMEs and entrepreneurs the opportunity to be front and center on every industry and area that matters to you. Today on the show, we're talking about the regulatory challenges, the regulatory changes really we're seeing for the IT industry. And to discuss that, I have with me here in the Mumbai studio, Aslam Khan, Chairman and CEO of Octaware Information Technologies. I also have Waqar Azmi, the CEO of Sutra HR, both gentlemen joining us from the Mumbai studio, and in Delhi, Akhilesh Tuteja, partner and head technology, KPMG India. Akhilesh, Aslam, Waqar, thank you gentlemen very much for being here tonight to talk about all the changes that the IT industry has been going through, whether we're talking GST, whether we're talking about what's happening on the visa challenges, or of course the layoffs that the industry has seen. Before we come to that though, we do have an entrepreneur on the panel, and because we talk to MSMEs, we love asking our entrepreneurs to very briefly in one line talk to our viewers about what you do.
I'm Aslam Khan. I'm the chairman and the CEO of Octaware Technologies. It's a company which is working on providing the software development services, enterprise solution, and consultancy services to the segment like healthcare, finance, and e-governments. We are spread across the US, Singapore, and the Middle Eastern countries.
Okay. Akhilesh, then let's set the tone for this panel discussion and talk first and foremost about the biggest concern that the industry, the IT industry is facing right now outside of GST, and that of course is the changes that we're seeing in the visa regime. Set the stage for us, set the tone for us, and talk about what likely we are going to see if the kind of changes that the present government in the US is talking about do comes to pass.
The point which you raised about the issues with respect to the new visa regime which has been proposed by the president in the US is certainly a matter of debate and concern for all of the people in the IT industry in India. The primary reason being that IT industry in India is significantly dependent on the business it receives from North American and especially the US companies. If you look at it over the last several years, the industry has thrived on the rates and the margins which they have made out of the work which they do for clients in the US. The proposed legislation about not only reducing the visas but also increasing the rate which has to be paid for the minimum wages for the IT service provider community is a matter of significant concern. What it means is that we will be able to have less people from India go and work in the US, and the industry will be forced to do one of the two things: either increase their domestic hiring or reduce their exposure from American businesses. Both of them could be an area of concern. The related point is that it would have been easier in the past to hire people locally because the minimum wages requirement were at a reasonable level. The new proposal also means that if you were to hire people in the US domestically, you will have to pay a lot more.
Sure.
Now what it will mean is that it's less opportunities to hire, but equally important, certainly there will be a rush to hire people domestically, and that will also increase the chances of getting the right talent and getting the right talent at right
Akhilesh,
price.
you're raising a very important point. In fact, this is something that I want to ask Waqar. We're very briefly talking about this before we started this panel discussion about whether an MSME, in your opinion, is going to be in a position from a cost perspective only to be able to take on either of these costs.
I don't think so, because I'll tell you what, if big guys can't handle the cost, I doubt if MSMEs will be able to handle it. Mainly because I think somewhere they also take a lot of outsourced work from the larger IT companies, and I don't see them taking a cost of the same, because I think they also would be massively impacted.
Okay, so if they're not able to take on the cost, and it is presumed that while it's going to be a really negligible cost for a large company, for an MSME, it is a significant cost.
Yes.
What do they do then in this environment?
I don't know. I think what they could probably look at is look at some other markets for work. I think currently also there are companies which are looking at different markets, maybe some of the other countries like Africa, or maybe there is some currency arbitrage wherever they could take advantage of. So, but yeah, I think, and also there is some, we've seen some layoffs also happening. So yeah, kind of times are tough. Let's see. I think only when it comes to, we'll see how they kind of work around it. Yeah.
So you're talking about layoffs. That's another big concern that the IT industry is seeing. I'll come to that in just a moment.
Yeah.
But to be able to compete effectively, when it comes to hiring on offshore and not so much on-site, like Akhilesh was saying, a larger company is at a disadvantage because they can't change their strategy around very quickly versus a small company. So is that going to be beneficial, Aslam, in your opinion?
Yes, and I'll just answer the question which you talked about. What would be the strategy for the MSME companies in the scenario of cost going high? So there are two different strategies. One, either you pass the cost to the client. Second, you basically convince them to let the work completely get done from offshore, from India.
Sure.
And that's what is beneficial for the MSME companies.
But being able to have that leveraging power, Aslam, with the client, I presume is much easier for a large company versus a small company.
That's right. Yeah.
So then what do? I mean, you're not in a position to pass it on, but you do have the advantage of being able to change your strategy. So you're in sort of like this middle ground.
See, India has been, in terms of the infrastructure, any work which is done there, today with the technology, you can entirely get it done from here. I mean, there's, for example, let's say if I'm doing a work for a client where 10 to 15 resources are sitting in India, they are working on a project, and there are 2-3 highly skilled workers are at the client side, closely working with them. Now, definitely those 2-3 positions can easily be transitioned to India, and those high skilled guys can work from here. That's like, what we are trying to talk to our clients now, that either you take the cost or you work on a strategy to entirely offload the work to the Indian companies.
Sure. Sure. You want to add something to that?
No, he has a very interesting point to it, because I think passing on to the the cost to the client is a very interesting strategy. What we really need to say, if clients are willing to take up the cost, right? Like, I think time will tell better how that goes. Yeah.
Okay. So Akhilesh, do you agree with the gentleman on the panel here in Bombay about passing on the cost? Is it going to be something that you would advise for MSMEs to look at seriously then?
I would certainly not consider that as a strategy number one, because that would be actually a plan C in my view, and that most people have started to do. Actually, if everybody followed that strategy, then that strategy will work, because ultimately the consumers will have no choice, because everybody has to go through the same thing, whether you're an Indian company or a US company. However, in my view, the winner will be those who will actually take advantage of this challenge and turn this adversity into something very, very powerful opportunity. And here are the couple of things which I will talk about. One, Aslam talked about, is trying and doing work for more offshore. I think that the industry has been trying, but the good news now is that with the latest communication and collaboration technology, one can do more. In my view, I think in the short term, that would be a potentially good strategy, but in medium to long term, there are two things which need to be done. One is that there is a clear need for the Indian industry to actually change its positioning from being completely services driven to product, IP or platform driven. Now, I could not have.
And we don't see enough of product development or IP work happening out of the Indian market, despite all the commentary that we've been seeing.
Sunanda, you're right, but I actually kind of get reminded of a situation saying when the time has to come, it does come. And in my view, this adversity might actually be the right timing for it to happen, because there are three things which have changed in the last 5 years which will make it happen now. Number one, that there is a domestic IT industry which is doing a lot of innovation which never did 5 years ago. Number two is that there is a shift from even in the developed market, from buying only from the big players because you wanted to buy an insurance, is buying from a smaller player. So they are actually okay to buy from an innovative and niche player rather than just always going to, for the namesake.
That's a fair point, Akhilesh. And in fact, you're talking about the domestic market. I also want to talk about the role of the government when it comes to government contracts and projects. But just before that, Waqar, you were talking about layoffs. Now, that is another big concern that the industry is facing at this point.
Yes.
Is it good news or bad news for MSMEs? Because on one hand, it means you get access to a larger pool of people who are perhaps highly skilled, and you can get them at a lower cost.
Can I make a point which Mr. Akhilesh made some time back? So he talked about maybe looking at developing products and all, but I think a product company usually doesn't require a lot of people. So like if you lay off about 2 lakh people out of, big IT firms, I doubt, like, if you kind of look at building products, I don't know how many product companies, because like, let's just say one of the biggest product company that I know is Zoho, and they have about 3,000, 4,000 people. Compare that to maybe the big giants who are like employing almost like more than 1.5, 2 lakh people. So I don't know how would that strategy work. But anyways, coming back to your point of layoff, it is very glaring. It's very scary right now because I think we've been talking to people and they are very unsure about the future. As far as MSMEs, see again, they are also taking work from offshore, right? They can only absorb them if they have work. So I think it at one point it might be advantageous to them to look at talent and maybe the cost of talent would go down, but not a great news for the country because, in a way inflation is going up and, the salary is going down. It's not a great thing for the country. I think IT industry had a huge impact and a lot of other industry also in terms of consumer spends and everything. And I don't think that's a great news, yeah. So it will have a massive impact on the people who are looking for jobs or like, working in various companies, yeah.
So you're saying that this is definitely impacting the industry. What should, let me come to you on this, Aslam. What should then the strategy be of MSMEs in this industry, which right now is looking very uncertain because you have layoffs, you have GST which is going to come in and the ambiguity on that, and you also have salaries then which are not increasing for the IT industry for many, many years now. What do you recommend?
See, on the layoff, is it happening because of this visa regime?
Not really.
We need to think about that. See, the
It's
layoff,
largely demonetization, I guess, which is having an impact as well.
and in the IT industry, today 4 million people are employed in the IT industry, and every year there is a layoff. There is a correction, like for example, they say the resources are not growing, they are not up to the mark with as per the industry. Then the correction is always made, right? Now, today we are talking about the layoffs and we are associating this with the visa issues, which I don't agree on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it the compounding of issues that are coming together?
Yeah, it could be. It could be, yeah.
Okay, do hold that thought. We'll take a very quick break at this point, but we will continue talking about the changes that the IT industry is seeing, particularly on GST on the other side. With us here on the Leaders of Tomorrow, and tonight we are talking about the IT industry, the changes it is seeing and what you, the MSME entrepreneur, should know and be prepared for. Akhilesh, I want to come to you on this. I was reading a report where the NASSCOM president R. Chandra says that complex billing and invoicing requirements of GST will hurt the industry more than help it. Your opinion on that?
Before I come on to GST, Sunanda, pardon me, but I'll go back to the point which was made on layoff, and I would truly second the point was made earlier that in my view, the visa regime isn't really a big driver for the layoffs, and I would actually not really bother too much, because if you actually go back to the 20 years of the history of IT industry, it has to go through its life cycle of evolution, and every 3 or 4 years you will see a skill matrix changing, you will see the cost buckets changing. So having a redesign of the pyramids, looking at different kind of skills is actually a norm in the industry. So I would really second the point which was being made that it is certainly not relating to that completely, and it certainly shouldn't be a big cause of concern as I see it from that standpoint. Coming on to the GST part, I think the problem is multidimensional, and therefore one has to look at what are the adverse impact as well as the positive impact. I would actually first start with the positive impact. Because of the GST, there's a huge amount of demand which has been created in the domestic market for re-architecting IT systems, about how do you go about billing those, how do you use the billing modules, how do you use different kind of technologies and systems to do auto return, how do you do these e-signing, etc. So there's a huge amount of impetus which happened to a large extent in the domestic IT which GST saw. The impact on the offshore market is rather negligible, because if you are doing completely export based billing, then it's really not that area of big concern. Yes, to people who are operating in domestic market, I would say it's a short term thing where the lack of full understanding by all ecosystem players will kind of delay a few things. It may actually impact the working capital lockup in the system for some time. One would expect that there will be initial hiccups in terms of delays in getting the auto processing and auto settlement of the transaction. Those will certainly have an impact, and if you look at MSME, that impact can be large purely because the working capital demand for those as a percentage of their revenue can be quite substantial.
Aslam, so it is definitely an opportunity for companies which are in the HR space, and Waqar's advice is for MSMEs to increasingly bring in IT as far as payroll and HR systems is concerned. Yes. But it also means opportunity for companies when it comes to developing IP or technology around GST and to be able to provide those services to companies.
Sure.
How do you advise companies should tap that?
So, as Akhilesh said, and he also mentioned that this particular GST change has increased the opportunity for the IT companies. Take, for example, our company, we entered into a domestic market with the opportunity of like Indian big companies who have implemented the ERP, and now those ERP, it needs a change for GST compliance. So yes, it has created the opportunity for the MSME, not only just as a product IP, but also as a services company. So now they can also start focusing the Indian domestic local market.
Okay. Akhilesh, I also want you to comment then about the domestic market, since we're talking about the domestic market in GST. IT contracts coming in from the government. The government is going all out talking about Digital India, Skill India, Make in India, for example, and those are necessarily going to lead to a lot of orders. I do know that your larger peers, whether it's in Infosys or a TCS, in fact, I think is one of the only successful ones when it comes to having worked with the government. Infosys not so much, gone on record to say that, you know, it's a difficult business to work with the government. But do you advise for MSMEs to look more closely at this segment?
I certainly would advise, and if you would have asked me this question a long time ago, I would have said that it's a tough market for MSMEs because there are two big barriers. One is that there are significant pre-qualification criteria working with the government, in which you need to have several qualifications before you can even qualify for a tender, and that sometimes MSME may not have. The second big barrier would have been a significant upfront money deposit for performance guarantee. That also could potentially put MSMEs at a financial stress. But again, I would look at some positives, a long way to go yet, but the government looking at reducing the pre-qualification criteria for MSMEs and also looking at certain governments waiving off the requirement for performance guarantee. Those are the two positive things. Having said that, the track record, and you mentioned some of these companies having commented on that, there is also a strong feeling that the revenue cycles of getting paid from government contracts can sometimes be fairly lengthy, and that puts significant working capital stress on the MSMEs. But again, I look at the two positives, one which I talked about the government exempting pre-qualification and some of these performance guarantee thing. And also, if you now look at it in the subsequent phases, which is now we are seeing of Digital India and also Startup India and many others, we are seeing contracts which can actually be better done by MSMEs because they are looking at a part of the big problem rather than trying to solve the big problem in one go. It does create a lot of positive opportunities as I see it.
Okay, we're talking about Digital and Skill India, and let me come to you, Waqar.
Yeah.
So, Skill India, have companies started seeing the benefit really coming out of that? And I'm talking specifically about the MSMEs and the SMEs, because a lot of what they tell us is that they don't know how it works. How do we ensure that we're getting more highly skilled labor? And highly skilled labor, of course, has always been a concern for this industry.
Okay, so I think it is coming through, but not much of an impact, honestly. You know, let me be very blunt here and tell you this: there's a lot of talk and very little substance on the ground. I don't know, like this whole Make in India thing also, which government came in, how much work is being done on that front.
Not much from what we hear
yeah,
from
what
MSMEs,
we hear. So
yeah.
again, I think I just see this as more of a marketing gimmick than actual work on the ground. If that would be the case, I'm sure there'll be much more skilled labor on there. So I think there's lot more talk and very little do. Yeah.
Okay, but that said, is the quality of labor which is coming in now into the industry, has that started improving, and what's really happening on salaries? Because for the longest time there seemed to have been a freeze on it.
I think because the export, if you look at it, our economy and the export, what India has been getting it. So because it's not increasing marginally, yeah, we are not able to, like, you know, grow from, let's say, X percentage to 2x. So that's where the kind of a work which is coming into India is basically stagnant. Now, at that point of a time, you can't just, if the revenue is not high, you cannot keep on increasing the salaries of the employees. So as an entrepreneur, the way we look at it, if there is a increase in our revenue cycle, then we can see like, that, okay, let's talk about changing the structure of the salaries. But since for the last, let's say 3-4 years or 5 years, it has been same. So that's where the companies are also keeping the salary structure the same.
We're running out of time, so very quickly, if I can ask all of you gentlemen to give us closing comments. Let me come to you first, Akhilesh. I want you to talk to our MSME viewers about what, in your mind, is the biggest opportunity for them and how they should tap it going forward.
I would say the biggest opportunity from a domestic market in an ultra short term is right now to focus on GST and helping their clients get their system GST ready, as has been spoken about. In my view, in the long run, the MSMEs have a great potential to innovate and create some opportunities which currently are not completely services based. If they have to sustain and survive in a highly competitive IT environment, they must have something which is either a very deep industry or very strong foundational IP, which is what will make them successful.
Okay. Aslam, you're an entrepreneur. One piece of advice that you've received which has changed the way you perhaps think about your business in the IT space.
Yeah. So there are two things. One is in the IT business, when we start a company, and all MSMEs, they start with low capital and the low expenses, right? So the best advice I got to basically have the mentors for the entrepreneurs when we are starting the business. So that's number one. The focus on the mentoring,
Sure,
rather than just focusing on the capital
fair
and other things. Number two, as Akhilesh advised, so we always in the IT industry try to focus on the export. Yeah. Now, since with the new initiatives of the government, we can start focusing on the Indian market too. Especially when there is a circular when the government says that 20% of the government contract has to be through the MSME.
Sure.
So we should basically leverage on that.
Okay, so mentoring and focusing on the domestic market. Waqar, let me come to you at the end. A lot of the MSMEs tell us that we hire people and then we train them, and within 6 months they've left for better or more exciting opportunities. One piece of advice, how do they hang on to this talent they've hired?
I think they have to create a very, I think they have to create a lot of nice culture. I think culture is a very, very important thing. Probably let's see where the talent is going, see what they're offering that they can't offer besides money. Sure. So I think there's a lot of growth opportunity, learning opportunity that they need to create for retaining this talent. And if they kind of create this culture where people are thriving, growing and learning, I think they should be in a better position to retain the talent, yeah.
All right, Waqar, Aslam, Akhilesh, thank you all very much for being with us here tonight. If you are an MSME that wants to get in touch with us, you have any comments about anything that we've said on the show, you can always write in to us at leadersoftomorrow@timesgroup.com. You can reach us on social media using the hashtag LOT, or tweet at me personally using Sunanda_J, or you can reach us on social media using the Leaders of Tomorrow on Facebook, or call us on that number you see on your screen. We promise to have all your questions answered. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.